Welcome, everybody. This is the informational meeting of Tuesday, October 1st, and we'd like to welcome everybody out there that is here. We're going to follow the agenda pretty much as it's laid out here, and we're going to start out with our staff reports first. And I believe Lori Hogstead, City Clerk, is up first. Lori?
Thank you, City Council. I just want to give you an update on the petition process, the rezoning referendum petitions, and where I'm at with that process. I did send out a press release on Friday and received quite a few calls and questions on that on Friday. And also a letter was sent out to both the parties, those representing Save Our Neighborhood as well as those representing Walmart. And after the 5% cursory review of the signatures, which is something that we've done for every petition drive, and this is our fourth in the last 12 months. The resulting, the review verified that 86.77% of the signatures were valid, meaning that the final result of the numbers was that we had 5,642 valid signatures. They needed 5,089, so that was an overage of 553. That part of the process is done, which now means my next step in the process will be to review the affidavit of deficient signatures that the Walmart representatives filed with my office. And I will begin going over those just over 2,000 alleged deficiencies item by item and responding in writing. My estimate of the time that this will take is approximately 3 to 4 weeks, and I will of course, prioritize that and work on that every possible minute that I have so that I can get that done and report back to you. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions for Lori at this time? Good. Thanks, Lori.
All right. Thank you.
I believe next we have Jim David, our Legislative Operations Manager. Welcome, Jim.
Good afternoon. Jim David, City Council Office. Each of you should have received an email yesterday requesting your legislative priorities for the 2014 legislative session, which is only 3.5 months away, along with below zero weather and blowing snow. But the current working draft includes 2 proposed items, one that prohibits alcohol in taxi cabs and the other that supports a statewide texting ban. Those are just 2 of the options that each of you will consider, but if anybody could, or if everyone could please get me their legislative items by October 14th, I'll provide an update the following day at the informational. Secondly, we are looking to schedule a Saturday morning coffee with the council in October or November. Possible Saturday dates include October 19th, the 26th, or November 2nd or 9th. So if anybody has any preferences for either of those 4 dates, please let me know, or conflicts, and we'll try to find a date that works for everyone. So,
are there any questions for Jim? Yes, please.
Could you repeat those dates again?
Yeah, October 19th, the 26th, November 2nd, and November 9th. There was concern that there would be recarpeting and repainting during that time period, but we found out this afternoon that that's going to be delayed till probably December.
Are there any other questions for Jim? Thank you, Jim.
All right, thank you.
Councilor Karski, would you like to give us an update on the Land Use Committee report as of September 17th, please?
Be happy to, Councilor. We had 2 agenda items at that meeting. The first one being annexations and kind of the general process, forced versus requested annexations, and specifically in areas that are developed, such as the Prairie Meadows area out on the west end of town. Nothing imminent at this time as far as any annexations coming, forced or otherwise, but just kind of an informational as to the process, the costs involved with it to develop properties and the like. The other one was on our TIF ordinance, and I'm not going to steal any thunder from them. They're here to talk about the exact same subject on our next agenda item for our informational meeting, so we'll hear more about that in just a minute.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Councilor Karski? Okay, that being said, I think we'll move right into the open discussion, and with that, we are going to ask for a report concerning the tax. There were some questions that came to land use concerning the TIF. Darren, Brent, I think you guys are going to answer that.
Right. Good afternoon, Council. Brent O'Neill, representing the Community Development Department. Councilor Karski's right. We did have a Land Use Committee meeting last week ago where we talked about some of our follow-ups on various things that we've been looking at with TIF over the last year or so, and some changes that we want to bring forward. In particular, there are some things that we want to bring forward through ordinance that we really feel rose to the level of needing to get to that point. Most specifically is about an application process going forward and then fees that would be associated with that application process. So what we intend to do in the next couple of weeks is bring forward an ordinance for your consideration before the month is out, but wanted to give you a sneak peek and a follow-up from the Land Use Committee on a little bit more of the details of what would be in that ordinance. Again, the application would be just something that we put into a code to clarify that an application is required and to make that a consistent action going forward. The charges associated with that, what we would be proposing in that ordinance are 3 tiers. One is an application fee of $2,500. That's to start the process. That's to start getting staff involved at a deeper level, investigating, researching, evaluating, and so forth. The second is to build in a recovery mechanism for the hard costs that the city incurs in creating the TIF. The number one fee or the number one cost the city incurs is outside legal work that we do. We've on every TIF that I've been a part of, and I think probably every TIF that the city has done, there has been some level of legal work outside of the halls of City Hall. So that fee, as it's going to be written in ordinance, is going to be just a direct reimbursement for those costs. The city does right now collect those fees through the TIF. Unfortunately, there's about a 2-year lag before we get those fees back. So what this does is just shift that so that we're working more hand in hand with an applicant and a developer on making sure that the city's recovering those fees right away at the onset of a TIF. And then a third, again, is a little bit towards the city's costs of administering a TIF in the long run. Every year till a TIF meets its final payment, there's a tracking piece, there's a reporting piece, there's a monitoring piece, but ultimately it's the initiation and transfer of payment to fulfill any TIF commitment. So the ordinance that you'll see starting next week will have a $250 fee for those payments moving forward. With that, that's the main update we wanted to give you today. Certainly, we can answer any questions or get any feedback from you on what you'd like to hear from us as we come forward in the next 2 weeks with the first and second reading on what this ordinance will be, as well as just some things that we're trying to do and things we've shared with the council and the committees on how we're trying to make our process more effective.
Are there any questions for Brent or Darren? Councilor Jameson, please.
Brent, I was sitting in the meeting last time. The conversation came up about disclosing the applicants' names, and not just including XYZ corporation, but the actual individuals. I've heard a lot of input from people about these TIFs, and I think the rest of the council is feeling a little skittish about issuing TIFs, just in general. But I think in full disclosure, it would be fair for us to know who these people are. If I understand it right, it's a small group of people who are utilizing these TIFs because they maybe know about it, they know how it works, they know what to do, but for whatever reason, I think it's just fair that there be full disclosure of exactly who they are.
Sure. No, I agree with that, and I think our application can accommodate some sort of ask, getting that information at the onset on who principals might be.
Principals are. That'd be fair. Thank you.
Okay.
Councilor Segers, please.
Yeah, in regard to the TIFs, in trying to find out, who is getting TIFs in the future, could we find out who has TIFs presently right now?
Yeah, we can put a list together of the TIFs and share, who those people are and who the entities are. For sure.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, I might suggest too that TIF, that not just who the people are, but the TIF number like you'd given us before, along with what it was for. I think it'd be just a good information sheet for us to have.
Yeah, be happy to.
So it's pretty inclusive that way. Okay. Are there any other questions? Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Thank
much. This is the time for council open discussion. Are there any other questions or any other comments that the council has at this time? Yes, Councilor Jameson.
Thank you. I've got two items. Earlier, Dave Bixler and Jim David and I met regarding the task force that we're putting together for the paratransit service. And there's just been some talk about putting it back over to public services to allow them to kind of make sure that we stay on task. But that hasn't been fully finalized. We were hoping Councilor Anderson was here, but the intentions were to talk with the chairman there and look for his help and assistance to keep that task force together. We met and talked about some of those individuals who've already verbally agreed to participate in the task force, meeting the providers and caregivers in the community and some user groups. But I just wanted to share that they were moving that along, and that we were hoping that Councilor Anderson would welcome that into public services just as a body to kind of keep it together and give updates. But that was the intent. It won't burden those other members of the public services any further, but the idea was to have it in a committee like all other task force have been. And then as well, we're trying to figure out the number of counselors to be involved so that our ownership and participation stays at a high level. But we're working through that, I guess. So if you've got ideas or thoughts, please know that we're working on it.
Great. I know Councilor Rolfing was very interested in that also,
Right.
so I would hope, Greg, that both you and he be involved.
Yeah.
And I think that suggestion is a good suggestion, so we'll carry that forward. If you'd want to bring it up to Councilor Anderson, Jim, if you would, please, David, and see if you'd be willing to accept it, just let us know, and we'll just kind of run with that. I think it's a great idea, Greg. Anything else then?
One other item after our budget adoption, I received a couple of emails calling me a dog hater because of the way we voted on the amendment or the budget, and some healthy discussions about dogs in these dog parks. But I just wanted to share an idea that I had. You know, we have a lot of other parks in our city, and maybe instead of designating 2 parks specifically, maybe we could incorporate in a smaller fashion a dog park within some of our existing major parks, not the neighborhood parks, but more of those regional parks that are bigger and have a parking lot, have a water supply, have some lights. They don't have to be as big as the current one that we have off of Cliff, but maybe see, I even got the look from Sue about the dog park vote. So anyway, all I'm trying to find is a different solution and not wait until next year to vote on these. Maybe going forward we have a way to implement them within our park system. Not every park, but some of the major parks, and we could do it affordably and without committing ourselves to $1 million worth of dog parks. So that was my dog park comment after being called the dog hater. It's not true. I am not a dog hater, but I just thought I'd bring that up for discussion because I think it could be a great solution for all of us to build at least friendly parks for dogs.
Way to think outside the fence.
Right.
At least it's done with a smile on her face. That's great. Thank you very much. Good input. I appreciate it. Okay. Are there anything else to come up in open discussion?
Oh,
Yes, Councilor Staggers, please.
if I could just ask a quick question. This is a little off the mark, but somebody was calling me about this, and I didn't have a definitive answer. How many dogs can a property owner have? Is it 3 dogs or
4.
It is 4? 4. Oh, okay. Thanks a lot.
Well, if I could, it's 4 animals. Okay. So it could be,
You can't have four dogs and then a couple cats. You have to have 4 domestic animals. That's your limit.
Thank you.
Thank you. That being said, I think we're done here in open discussion unless anybody else has anything. Great. We've got some presentations here, and the first one on our agenda is Adam. And this is concerning the 3rd Annual Mayor's Neighborhood Summit, I believe. Welcome, Adam, and welcome, Russ.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Council. Adam Roach with the Community Development Department. On behalf of Russ Sorensen and the Planning Department, we'd like to invite you to the 3rd Annual Mayor's Neighborhood Summit to be held November 2nd from 8:30 to 12:30. This year's agenda will feature a Q&A session with the mayor We'll talk about some neighborhood success projects that have happened throughout the community, and then we'll also have some roundtable discussions, which would be a great opportunity for you to listen in to your constituents and address some of the challenges and opportunities that they have within their neighborhood. The event is free. It doesn't include a breakfast. There will be some mid-afternoon snacks as well. People can register online at www.siouxfalls.org. It's on the main page there under Neighborhood Summit, or they can contact Russ or I to get registered for the event. Any questions?
Are there any questions? No. Looking forward to the presentation. I hope there'll be a number of us there.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. Our second presentation, we have Rich Oaksel, our internal audit manager. We've got a presentation on the 2 internal audit reports with the downtown River Greenway and then the parks and recreation cash handling. Thank you, Rich.
Yeah, I think we'll start with the cash handling report. That's the smaller report. And just for the information of the viewing public, you can look at all of our audit reports at the, if you go to the city website, the main page, and click on the city council section, you should find a internal audit in the drop-down menu. If you click on that, you'll see all of our reports there. So if you want to read those reports, they're online. The park report is a follow-up audit. We did the original cash handling audit in 2009. We had a number of audit recommendations, and this objective of this report was to make sure that those recommendations were addressed by management. Park and Rec takes in approximately $1.1 million in revenue each year, such things as concession permits, recreation leagues, swimming fees, and many other smaller items. They take credit cards, they take currency and coin, and they take checks. So we wanted to make sure that we had good controls in place. And on page 2 and 3 of the report is the findings from 2009, the things that needed to be addressed. And we concluded that all the recommendations from that 2009 report had been implemented. We concluded that management at the Park Department had been diligent about addressing those audit concerns. They took them very seriously and had made major efforts to address those issues. And we want to thank them for their cooperation during this audit. Sir, are there any questions about this follow-up audit?
Questions at the time? Kermit?
Yeah, Rich, it seems like a lot of businesses are not taking checks anymore.
Yeah.
Have we got stuck with bad checks, very many or not, the city?
I don't know how many we have. I'm sure it happens. Yeah. But I think more and more people, you're right, are going with a debit card or a credit card or cash, currency. I think checks are sort of phasing out.
I was just wondering whether we should phase that out to the city.
Yeah. Well, I know for our vendors that when we pay somebody, we're going to electronic transfer of funds. We don't like to issue checks ourselves. I don't know if management in the city has decided not to accept checks for payment. I don't know if that's been discussed yet, but yeah.
That's a good.
Some people still pay with the checks.
And that is a good question. It's a good information point, if nothing else, Kermit. So we'll see if we can't get that from the Director of City Finance. Questions? Any other questions on this report? Okay, Rich?
Okay, the next one is the River Greenway. And we did an audit on that Quality of Life Bond Issue 2 last year, and this was kind of a subcategory, if you want to look at it that way, of that quality of bond issue. We looked at specifically the Phase 1 and Phase 2 improvements on the River Greenway. Phase 1 was completed last year, and Phase 2 was just completed about a month ago. We had the ribbon cutting for the Phase 2 improvements. The work focused on the east bank from the 6th Street to just past 8th Street, with some improvements on the west bank. And Confluence was the design firm the city used for both phases, and we also hired them to do the contract administration as well. And then Swift Construction had won the award as the general contractor for both the phases. Total costs for both the Phase 1 and Phase 2 were about $9.2 million total. Phase 1 was more expensive, about $5.4 million, and Phase 2 is about $3.8 million. On page 5, we listed we identified the sources. The primary source was the second penny sales tax, and then there's also a bond issue, that quality of life bond 2 issue. And then there is also money from the Big Sioux River Environmental Trust. And that, it's important to note, that was about $1.9 million. That was not taxpayer dollars. That was money from a fine that was imposed on John Morrell Company for some pollution into the Big Sioux River. And that was back, I think, in the mid-'90s. So it had been sitting there in that trust and accumulating interest. And before the city could use it, the city council had to pass a resolution, and a federal judge had to approve that project for the use of that environmental trust money. And that money could only be used for very specific river projects. It isn't something that it could have been used for streets or something like that. So that was pretty much the only thing that we could use it for, was river improvements like this. Our conclusion was that we found no evidence that the budget authority was exceeded on this project. We found that internal controls are in place and functioning to mitigate the likely risk for this type of project. For example, there is performance bonds, there is insurance on these projects. A lot of testing goes into this. We hired Geotech as a subcontractor to take core samples of the concrete to make sure that they were the proper strength, so that we weren't having concrete installed that was likely to fail. So there's a lot of controls in place, and we found that they're functioning as intended. And the pay requests are being reviewed by several people before the contractor is being paid. We know that the scope of the project changed significantly from the original scope back in 2004, but we found that the City Council over the years took 3 specific actions. On page 5 at the bottom of the report, there's 3 specific actions that the City Council took to increase the funding before contracts were let. This was in addition to what was ever in the capital plan, in the CIP plan. And you can see those on the bottom of page 5 there. So we concluded that budget authority was not exceeded. We found no evidence that it was, and that internal controls were in place and functioning as intended to mitigate the likely risk on this type of project. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Other questions for Rich on this audit? No questions, Rich.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
Okay. Is there any other, anything else that needs to come before the council at this time, before this informational meeting? No? Well, that's cool. And I guess at this time, too, there is no committee meeting following this meeting, so we will gather again at 7 o'clock for the city council meeting. Meeting adjourned.